Hey there, I'm Mike Dunn, the editor-in-chief of Tabletop at Gaming Trend, and today I have Sabrina Culyba here to talk about her game that is currently heating up on Kickstarter, Diatoms. And this game was also the winner of the Cardboard Edison Award this year, and it's got a great theme that I think it's best if Sabrina would describe it because it's pretty awesome. Sabrina, give us a little bit of info about yourself and Diatoms.
Well, I'm a game designer. I am based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I have a very small, let's call it fledgling publishing company. And the first game I'm releasing is Diatoms. And in Diatoms, you play as a Victorian naturalist collecting algae from water, and then from that algae, you gather diatom tiles and arrange them onto microscope slide boards into microscopic mosaics. Microscopic mosaics, because in the game they're not microscopic. But this is based on a real practice that started in the late 1800s, where people would go out and collect water samples and hunt around under a microscope for the perfect different geometrically shaped diatom, and then arrange those diatoms onto microscope slides to really only be seen by a very small number of people. And in the game, it usually takes like hundreds of hours to do that, but in the game you can do it in 30 to 40 minutes.
Nice. Yeah, so I think I had vaguely recollect hearing about the diatom mosaic art from the Victorian era before this. It's just like some forgotten memory that I had acquired over the years. So when I was looking at the Kickstarter and looking at the theme, I kind of went down a rabbit hole.
Yes.
And it's some pretty amazing stuff. What inspired you to, like, what came first, the mechanics or the theme, and what inspired you to embrace this theme in this way?
Well, when people play the game, they often talk about the dual puzzle nature of the game. There's a central puzzle that everybody is playing into with tile placement. That's the water pond area. And that part is very similar to the very first prototype, which was totally abstract. And I called Fraxagon at the time. Then the mosaic part, which is your personal puzzle that you're sort of laying out and building up over the course of the game, that came from the theme. And that theme emerged pretty much exactly at the 50% development point for the game, because I saw a sign at the Baltimore Aquarium that had a picture of diatoms on it, and that led me down an internet rabbit hole about diatoms, which were gorgeous, which I'd learned about as a word on a page in probably middle school or high school biology class.
And there's diatomaceous earth, which you use to
Which honestly I never made. I don't think I really made the connection that that's diatoms, but I never really appreciated how beautiful they were until I saw this sign, and I couldn't get it out of my head. I went home, and I was actually at Unpub, which is a unpublished board game event that takes place in Maryland. I was in the Maryland area to go to Unpub and visiting the aquarium with family. And so I was playtesting actually a version of Fraxagon there. And then at night I was Googling about diatoms and thinking, should this be the theme of the game? And when I saw diatom mosaics, I have like a design log, and I just wrote in capital letters diatoms. And within like 6 weeks, 2 months after that event, I had a version of the game that was themed diatoms, called Diatoms, and visually, aesthetically, it evokes the current game. It's basically, I went all in. And it is one of my goals now that people go down this internet rabbit hole, because I think it's astonishingly wonderful and marvelous. And I want everybody to sort of take that journey and see it.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I think I just remembered where I might have heard of it. I spent my senior year of high school in England, and we went to the Natural History Museum, and I would imagine that some of these slides ended up there.
Yes. A good number of these folks who were doing this work were based in the England area. Yeah.
Makes sense. Very cool. So yeah, I got to try the game last night on Screentop, and it's like, if there were other games that you would compare it to, like the first one that kind of came to my mind while I was playing it in terms of arranging the diatoms, the little pieces of the diatoms themselves onto the mosaic board was like Azul, but 4-dimensional or something crazy like that, right? Whereas Azul is just like a grid, basically. This was like much more visually interesting and much more brain work, because there's a lot of abstract parts to it that you kind of have to map, to kind of game out in your head as you're placing them. Chances are I probably played it wrong too, because I didn't like read the rules too much before I dived right in. But that's generally, I worked through that. It was my eagerness. I blame it all on my eagerness. So, but yeah, what games, for instance, inspired you to make diatoms?
Well,
I guess is where I'm headed at.
My goal for designing the game, I actually had a grant to work to create a board game that would be a family weight thinky board game that would support math identity. And so I was doing a bunch of different prototypes around different angles on how games can support math identity and what problems in sort of feeling like math is something that's for you crop up. And spatial reasoning and fractions were two areas of focus that I was looking at. And so the original prototype kind of came from a game that was like you were doing a lot of spatial reasoning around fractions, and that's like it's Bud. And in my dream world, I wanted a game that would have sort of the thinkiness, but also appeal of an Azul, for sure. Azul is one of my favorite games. I love how thinky it is. I love how beautiful it is. I love how it's tied to like a craftsman type theme. And so, I'm pleased to bits when people compare Diatoms to Azul, because I think Azul is a wonderful game that is thinky and chewy, but also approachable and family weight. You can play it that way. So I think Azul can get a little more cutthroat than Diatoms can get, depending on who you're playing with. It can get a little. There's a lot of theory of mind depth you can go into Azul to try to like block other people. Diatoms you can kind of do that, but it's a little more cozy, I think, in the feel, and that's what as intentional. The other games that I hadn't actually played when I was designing Diatoms, but people compare it to, and I own one of them now. Sagrada comes up, which is another craftsman. It's like based on a sort of a craft type artisan topic, a theme, and then the other one is Calico. And I think partly because it's a puzzly game. It's got a kind of cozy colors, and it has the hex tiles, and you're building like a quilt. So like I've sort of in my head started imagining like a board game tasting bar of Azul, Calico, Sagrada, and Diatoms, and that to me is I'm pleased with that comparison. But if you like any of those games, there's a good chance that you will enjoy Diatoms.
Well, and now that you think about it, it does feel like Diatoms is kind of like a mix of a little bit of Azul with Calico, right? Because there's that like you're building your mosaic aspect, but then there's also the other part of the game where you're trying to get the pieces by tile laying and then putting that little microscope, not a lens on it. Which, interestingly enough, like when I first saw that, I thought, oh, is that like kind of one of those, like it has like would have a red piece of plastic on it, and there'd be a hidden message thing there.
Oh yeah.
No, it actually, and I was like, oh, that's a little on the gimmicky side. I've only seen a couple. Yeah, nice. Yes,
yeah, there it is.
Nice. I was taken aback by how necessary that was, because as I was placing tiles, I was like the part that I was having a little trouble wrapping my head around was like, because you're allocated diatoms according to the intersection point of 3 different hex tiles, right? And so when I was placing it, it was a bit of a brain twist to kind of like, game that out and figure out where the best place to put it was. But then I put the lens on it, and I was like, oh, it's completely clear. It's totally obvious now. So I was really surprised at the utility of that particular feature in the game.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch people play. So the lens tool serves for three purposes. It allows people to see more clearly the sample, especially when they're starting out. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, it's a very utilitarian, like scaffolding tool. It's also the current player marker. In one version of the game, everybody had their own lens tool. But as the game evolved, I sort of settled on there's one, and it's like the current player has access to that. And so you can use that to pass around, because there is some asynchronous to the game where if you're playing, you gather your diatoms, the next person can start exploring the pond while you're still thinking about where your diatoms go, and you kind of have to the start of your next turn to make your commitments to where you're going to place your tiles. And so there is a little bit of like the game is happening while you're maybe thinking, and that lens kind of provides a focus. And then there's sort of a role play element that people really like about, like, I am peering into the water and scouring around for little pieces of algae that's just fun, you know, and it sort of adds to the immersion of the game. But if you watch people play, the first game people will use it, the second game they might use it, and by the third game, like, they don't need to use it. Maybe right. It's fun to use it, but like they can start to see the sample, and that's which delights me, because my motivation is kind of like supporting that like spatial reasoning, spatial visualization skill set, and so it's nice to see that emerge from play.
Well, and it's validation that you're training your players, right?
Yeah.
You're literally like they're literally internalizing the tools as they're playing over different sessions. No, I thought it was fascinating, the interplay between the hexes and the mosaics, and it also felt there was a lot of familiarity to it, but there's also a lot of like kind of freshness to how that worked, and yeah, I see what you mean. There's not as much like player versus player interaction. It's all about that kind of central hex board, and I imagine there could be some gotcha moments where like one person places a hex and they're like, no, I wasn't going to do that.
There's no hidden information in the game, so you can be, you know, sort of checking out what everybody's looking for and try to, like, you know, combine what you want with maybe placing your tile in an area of the pond that you know would be helpful for someone else. But the game doesn't super reward that. It's not a main strategy.
Right. So this is your first board game, or is it your first board game, or is it the first board game for your new company, Ludoliminal?
Yes.
Because I know you've worked with games for quite a bit of time, both digital and non-digital. I guess give us a little background on is this your first game, or is this just your first like real first game? That didn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I come from video games. That's like I worked in video games for 13 years, and video games plus, you know, so VR installation, location based, in addition to just things that would be considered sort of standard video games. So a lot of different experiences. If I'm being true to myself, I think of what I like to do as experience design, and then there's different mediums and platforms you can use to design an experience. I do have one board game that I published through Peaceable Kingdom with my partner. So we, as a family, designed a family game for very young kids to co-play with adults. It's a cooperative game. It's called Yahar Hunt. It's published by Peaceable Kingdom. And it's currently out of print. Okay. It was sold out. It was released at the start of the pandemic. And now I believe it's basically sold out. And I don't think that they're going to do a rerun print of it. But that was my first experience publishing in the board game world. And this, I hopefully will do more publishing myself through my company. This is the first game that I'm doing the whole process for that.
You got big plans. Awesome. Well, you know, right out the gate with a cardboard Edison winner isn't too shabby.
That was very nice. Yes.
So you come from a video game background. You've worked with VR. What made you decide to kind of pull back on the technology aspect of it. Why is Diatoms a board game instead of a video game?
Oh, that's like I said, I don't necessarily feel like the platform or the medium is the point when it comes to designing experiences, but probably has a lot to do with becoming a parent and not that we play a ton of digital games. I love digital games. I have a 10-year-old and a 2-year-old now. So we play a lot of different digital games too, but you just sort of appreciating a growing appreciation for physical board games and that design process and wanted to explore that more.
So I don't know if you checked out our site, but Gaming Trend also covers video games.
Yes.
And one of the things that I always look for as the head of tabletop are places where like the two spheres kind of interact. Because I've been working with Gaming Trend for 20 years, and 15 of that was primarily on the video game side. Personally, I got burned out on video games and like rediscovered tabletop games, which is what got me into gaming in general when I was a kid in the first place. But I think I was fascinated by your background and your decision to go into a more analog world with it. And I think there's a lot of sharing back and forth between video game design and board game design these days. And I think this, what you're doing really kind of puts a microscope on it, so to speak. Are there is there anything specific that you can think of that you took from your video game expertise and applied it here?
So I think a lot about the first player experience, and it's very different designing tutorialization and scaffolding for a board game than it is for a video game. But a lot of times I think it's hard to not do it at all in video games. Like even when you get like a vertical slice or some kind of alpha version of the game, like you have to kind of explain, and the game can kind of push an explanation onto the players, right? And there's a whole aspect of game design which is about that like direct and indirect control for video games of how to tutorialize and tell people how to play. And in board games, there can be a temptation to just be like, you're in the room explaining it for a large part of the game design's life. I operate very strongly around trying to get like the game to explain itself much earlier in the process than some people would recommend. It means sometimes sunk cost into it, but that comes from my experience, I think, and my preferences from video games of wanting the game to be able to speak for itself versus having to do like a teach. And then that's how also I prioritize playtesting. I prioritize playtesting with families, and I do a lot of that playtesting 100% like cold blind, where I give them the game and then they playtest when I'm not even there, and then they report back.
Oh, nice.
Which, it comes with costs. There's trade-offs, and they're both like different ways of playtesting are valuable. But for me, that's I think that's an influence of my time in video games and wanting the game to do more speaking than me as the designer. So that is one thing. I still find the idea of making complex games much more difficult in board games than in video games, because the game has to be run, like the engine is the player's brains. And so they need to internalize so much to be able to just move the game forward, where in video games, players are reacting to what the game is putting out, and the game can proactively react to them and present them with new information or prompts or feedback. And that's hard to pull off in a board game. And so designing a complex board game with lots of different systems, I think, is a harder design challenge. Maybe not implementation, since it's paper,
right,
but a harder design challenge than potentially in video games.
Well, and I mean, like a computer isn't going to screw up the rules, right?
Probably not. Well, if it does, we call it a bug, but you don't tell the players that they're the source of a bug.
Right. So yeah, one of the things that we find at Gaming Trend as we review games is that one of the first pain points is in fact the rules, and uh, sometimes game designers are just too close to their game to write rules.
Always,
yes, to write rules for other people, and so. It was very like now I didn't read all the rules, but I did look at the rule book, and just the UX designer in me appreciated how you laid it out and how you explained things. There's a level of care that you don't see in probably at least 50% of the games on the market today. But yeah. Now let's talk about your playtesting and your design process real quick. When did you start designing Diatoms? And what kind of kicked that process off?
It was early summer of 2021. I was doing a bunch of different like prototype ideas, none of which had coalesced into a playable game that I could put in front of naive playtesters. But like it were kind of interesting around different aspects of math. And I was actually on vacation visiting family and just couldn't get this idea of hexes out of my brain, and it was started doodling in my notebook, and then I cut out these little tiles that look a lot like the current diatom water tiles, as it turns out. I mean, I had some vague idea of there was going to be like trays of food that you were trying to get different proportions of meals into a tray, something like that. My little prototype tiles were too small. I couldn't even use them to do like a first play test with family because we were visiting family in Virginia. So I immediately made different tiles that were just color and played that multiple times with family internally. And then that was what I was calling Fraxcon. That game was an abstract and continued to evolve with the core puzzle tile placement thing the same, but what you did with what you were gathering, with like when you made your intersections and connected the tiles, what you did with that was different, like changed and evolved, and that's the part that I kept iterating on. That fall, I started doing blind playtesting with that game, it wasn't a game that you'd take off the shelf. One of the reasons why I never like moved forward with publishing it at that time, or like thought about even doing that, because I knew it didn't have the appeal. But when I tested it with families who are opting into trying it at least, and I asked them to play twice, it got really good response from the gameplay. So the mechanics and like how the interest of playing the game, I thought showed promise, but I didn't feel like it was something that you'd be like, oh, let's take this off the box, off the shelf at the store, because it didn't have like a hook to draw you into some kind of experience. It was purely the mechanics. And like I said, it existed like that for about a year, with me experiencing moments of despair is too strong of a word, but like, is this ever going to go anywhere? I think there's a good game here, but I don't know if I can, if it's going to like really bring people in. So, and then it was the encounter with the sign that kind of led to, this has something that would not only draw people in, but then there's gameplay. When you show up and you play, it has a depth and a satisfying thinkiness to it that would keep people. So you can pull people in and keep them. And that, I think, is like the two halves you need for a successful game on the market.
It's really interesting. You're the second designer that I've talked to recently that had the theme kind of present itself and immediately solve several design problems that were inherent in the prototype up to that point. It was apiary.
Oh yeah.
Gosh, yes.
Connie's game. Yeah.
Blanking on Connie. Yes, yeah. Connie Vogelman. I interviewed her recently, and she was talking about how like she always had the idea of being a beehive, but there were certain aspects that of gameplay mechanics that were kind of coming up that like normal bees would not be able to do, and so making it a futuristic space beehive solved all those problems and immediately like kicked up the appeal, the theme appeal. So anybody who thinks theme is not important in a board game doesn't understand how it can just make everything kind of lock in.
Yeah, well, and we talked about that scaffolding and instructional thing too. And I think when there are beautiful moments when your theme, when the player knows the theme, and then from that the player can infer how they think the rules should work, and that's how they really work. That's gorgeous. Now the player, in some sense, is bringing their own internal knowledge to the game, and you don't have to explain that. You can confirm it. Like it's not like you don't have to put it in the rules, but they have an intuition that hopefully you can match, and that can be lovely.
Yeah. So it becomes a collaborative effort with the player. Now, you said you got a grant to do this. At what point in the process did that come into play?
Before I started. I made this...
Before you started?
Yes, the grant is the source of this game.
The pressure.
Oh, and when I say there are moments when I felt like just some like creator despair part of it was I had a grant. I want this game to live up to, a sort of a gesture of faith in my work that comes when you get a grant. So I definitely wanted to bring the game into the world to sort of like fulfill. There wasn't a requirement from the grant, but there was definitely the idea that this would lead to a publishable game. Yeah, the grant was through an organization called Karina Initiatives, and they run a fund mostly for video games called the Astra Fund that promotes and supports thinky game developers. It's a fantastic organization. The fund is fantastic with really amazing creators who are producing great thinky games. And I happened to meet them right when they were starting to figure out what they were going to do as far as the Astra Fund. And so they offered me a fellowship for a grant for a year to support board games, which is not what they normally support. I was I'm still like an odd duck in their portfolio, but they took a chance, and hopefully this game will, it will be a nice additional example of a game that their work helped bring into the world.
Excellent. And then earlier this year, you got nominated and then eventually won the Cardboard Edison Award. How did that feel in terms of just, obviously there was some validation that you got out of that. But, just kind of explain how that came about.
Well, so I'm not nominated. You apply, so anybody can apply.
Oh,
so
you apply.
Yeah,
okay,
you apply. You submit. You nominate yourself. I found out about the award the previous year, and I just really liked how it was set up, where there was emphasis on you get feedback on your game design, and a lot of people from industry judging it. And I'm relatively new to the board game industry community, and so I was kind of like, I also appreciated all the work that Cardboard Edison puts out in terms of providing resources for creators, and so I became a patron of theirs. Through their thing, so you could get their backlog of information about game design tips and stuff like that. And so I was aware of the award, the process that they do, and all of the resources they provide to game creators. And I thought it'd be nice one day to submit a game to that. Meanwhile, I was working on Fraxagon, which would become Diatoms, and I took Diatoms in its pretty close to its current form to PAX Unplugged in December of 2021. It had really good reception there. I was in love with the theme of the game, and I thought it was a pretty decent game. So I said, well, the deadline's in January. I'll submit this game. And to submit, you have to make a 2 to 5 minute video and submit the rules.
Right.
And then you have to be prepared, because if they are like, we like your game enough, you have to send them a prototype. So you have to have a completed game, although it doesn't have to be production quality. And so I submitted a video, and the rules said, and my main, at that time, I thought maybe this could be a game I could take to crowdfunding, because that to me felt like the only way I could be commercially successful as a publisher first time, because it'd be hard to get my game into retail stores or stores just having a catalog of one. Usually people are distributors, et cetera. They're looking for more. You to have more games under your belt. And so I was thinking crowdfunding might be the way to do the first game that I put out there. Although in my world of advice to myself, it was a card and dice game I should do first, something a lot easier to produce. But I was starting to feel like Diatoms might do well on crowdfunding, that it might pull in people because of its really cool theme and beautiful look and really thinky style, that might be a really good fit for the crowdfunding space. So my hope was if I could become a finalist, you get listed on the page for forever. And that would be, since I had like no following, was a company no one had heard of, that would be a very small way to just kind of boost visibility for the game. And then I knew I'd get feedback from, no matter what happened, from industry folks who played. And I thought that would be really useful feedback for me. So that's why I did it. And I was a finalist. So I sent a copy of the game in, and then, it was not like anywhere on my, of course I did not, I wasn't like entering to win first place. So I was really surprised and pleased. And it made me feel really good about the game in terms of like choosing it to bring to market, because a lot of people had played it who I had no relationship with, who were from industry, who play a ton of games. And they thought it was a great, innovative, interesting, compelling game design. And so that said, this game could have like legs as a game out there, and that it deserved to be out there. And that made me feel more confident about moving forward.
Nice. Now, I guess you kind of answered this already, but what made you choose to go the crowdfunding route instead of, say, finding someone to publish it? Selling the idea to a larger company.
Well, it's kind of like my decision to want to publish a game came before deciding that it'd be Diatoms that I would publish first. And I have other designs that I'd like to publish. Then some of them I've pitched to companies too. And I've done the pitching thing. And, it's part of it goes back to like what I really enjoy, which is the experience design. A lot of times with board game design, when you pitch to publishers, they take the mechanics and they put on all it's like the other stuff isn't part of what you get to design. Like the theme, the visuals, the components, how the box looks, how the box opens, what's the rule book, all of that stuff you don't get to be designer for most of the time. Someone else does that. Right. It gets another team that works on that, which is fine. There are people who are people do a great job with that, but I like that stuff. I wanted to do more of that stuff. So I thought the only way I'm really going to get to do
you've
that.
You've kind of done that stuff already on the video game side, right? Like you've already taken games from concept to publish
with a team, of course, right?
Yeah, but
yes,
team,
yeah.
So, excellent. So it looks like your Kickstarter's about almost halfway through.
Time-wise, yes.
Time-wise,
I think we have 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks left.
Yeah, 17 days, it says here. And you've made your goal.
Yes.
Haha, excellent.
I will be making this game for sure now. I have the funds to print the game.
Excellent. Now, I imagine you'll once the crowdfund is completed and you've made your game and you've gotten it out to backers, that you'll be looking to possibly get other companies involved in terms of distribution and stuff like that. How far ahead have you been thinking of that? Has anyone come knocking?
I've definitely had conversations. There's, when you become when you do the publishing, there's so much that comes into it, and some of it all that stuff I'm doing for the first time. So I come from game design and game development. That's super familiar, but manufacturer, shipping, distribution, fulfillment, retail, all that stuff is new for me, and I'm learning a lot. There are some aspects of it that I find less enjoyable and that it would be more intimidating to scale. Like being present at all the shows with a booth. That's a nice, great experience for people to come and see the game. There's a huge scaling issue with that when you're a solo entrepreneur, or even if I were to scale up a little bit, it would still be difficult to be. Oh yeah. So it would be. I have been thinking about like how can I build a partnership that would make it more possible for the game to be at these places, these specific events, be available in more spaces around the world. So we'll see what happens with where that goes. Yeah, I can't, as a tiny company, do it all myself, and I'm definitely hoping to forge multiple partnerships to make things happen for this game and future games.
Excellent. And you said you're going to be at PAX Unplugged this year.
I
guess you're right down the road from it, right?
I'm in Pittsburgh.
You're in the same state. Yeah, well, that's a little further away.
It's a little further away, but you know what? I went last year for the first time. Really enjoyed it. It was. I met a lot of great people. I had a great time in the Unpub room, which I recommend to anybody who's working on board game designs. Fabulous people there and really enjoyable playtesting. So I am definitely going to do it. I'm not going to have a booth or anything, but I will have at least one copy of Diatoms with me. So we won't be. The schedule for Diatoms is the print will be starting at the end of the year, and then we'll ship by July of 2024. So we'll be far out from getting boxes in hands of backers at PAX Unplugged, but I will be there with the game and checking other people's games, and yeah.
Excellent. Well, I hope we'll be there at PAX Unplugged. I hope that we can you can set aside some time for us. I'd love to get a play of the game.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Physical game.
Yeah. The Screentop version is good, but the physical version is the tiles are shiny and very satisfying, and they slot really nicely into the board. You just can't beat the
tactile nature of
there is something game. About opening the box and playing with the pieces that you can't get. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Sabrina, thank you so much. The game looks great. If you haven't already, definitely go hit up the Kickstarter. We'll have a link in the description, and you can go back it yourself. Go try the game on Screentop. I keep on forgetting that it's I'm like there's like all these different digital solutions for board games, and me being the person that burned out on video games is like, I don't want to do digital versions. But I actually like Screentop.
I'll put a plug for Screentop because it's free. It runs in almost any browser. It's great for just being very accessible. You can invite people and they don't have to buy anything to join your game, which is fantastic. And they've been awesome in supporting Diatoms. The guy who runs it is fabulous, and we're actively working on it, adding features. So.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to leave with two more questions. First question is, what games are you currently playing right now that you're really into?
Okay, I just finished It Takes Two in the video game world, which I'm kind of late to the party on, but I had a really great time playing that with my 10-year-old. And I haven't started a new video game as of yet. And I am about to play. I just got Dwarf Romantic and Fit to Print, which I was a backer for. So nice. Those are two games that I've really been looking for. Dwarf Romantic, the board game, not the digital version. So I'm hoping to play those.
That was a Spiel winner, wasn't it?
It was, and when you talked about like the interplay between video games and board games and how the lines are blurring, I think that's just like a beautiful example, right? I mean, video game, turn board game, one game of Gateway Game of the Year, biggest, most prestigious award in board games. Like I think that's just a signpost of how there's interesting interplay happening.
Totally. And then the other question is, I'm going to wager that you have other games that are that you're working on that are in the works. Is there anything you can tease us with, or I know you're still in the middle of this Kickstarter and you're trying to stay focused, but a good game designer always has more in the pipeline.
Oh yeah, I have like half a dozen games that I think maybe someday could. I've reached the point where I feel like maybe someday they could make it. The game I was planning on publishing first before Diatoms is called Unicorn Clinic. It's a game where you are cooperating. It's meant to be played cooperatively with kids like the 6-7 age range and adults, where you're treating sick unicorns. It just hasn't quite found itself yet. So I've pushed off publishing that, but I am excited to release that. And then I have two others, one that I've pitched around and gotten rejected, but has like amazing table presence, is really fun. every time I play test it, people are like, can I buy this now? So I am now thinking maybe if Diatoms goes well, maybe I'll publish that one myself. It's called Earthquake Escape. It actually won the Haba USA Family Game Design Contest in 2021. Like the same time I was starting working on Fraxagon, we submitted this game design to Haba and won that. That's a very tiny little contest that actually I don't think they're running anymore. But and then they said no to publishing a little
bit of trouble these.
Yes, they're like days. Since then some stuff has happened, but they rejected it before that happened. Like I said, once you win that, they look at it for publishing and they decided not to move forward. Gotcha. And I've pitched it other places and haven't found a biter, but I really like it and think and that's another kid adult cooperative, which is a large portion of what I typically design is yet younger than Diatoms with adults.
Nice.
So.
Okay. Well, excellent. Well, thanks, Sabrina. We'll definitely see you at PAX Unplugged, and
yes.
Out there, go try the game, go back it. It looks great, it plays great, and I think it's going to be a hit. So
thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thanks again, Sabrina.